Hey guys, today we're going to talk a little bit about beginning and ending our speech. This is not a really long lecture, but it's really quick and it's very important. This lecture should cover two of the three parts of the speech. Remember, a speech has three parts: the introduction, the body, and the conclusion. Today we talk about the introduction and the conclusion. So the first thing, of course, is the introduction. The introduction, of course, is composed of four parts. We have the attention getter, we have revealing the topic, establishing credibility, and also previewing the speech. The attention getter, the number one thing, is always the number one thing. We start off with the attention getter, and that is going to be something that really hooks the audience in and really makes them want to listen to the speech. Now, there's a difference between an attention getter and a greeting. A greeting would be something like, "Good morning, my name is John Burks." That's not really, who really cares? You really want something that really kind of piques their curiosity, or as they say, hooks them into the speech. Therefore, you may want to say something like your favorite quote, or your favorite Bible verse, or your favorite, like you may want to ask them a question that pertains to what you're talking about. That question may be response-driven or rhetorical, which we'll get to in a minute. Next thing, of course, is you want to reveal the topic. Now, as we kind of progress into some lectures later on, we'll talk about using a specific purpose statement, and that's a great way of revealing the topic. Sometimes you just literally say, I'm going to be talking today about X. In your introduction speech, when you introduce yourself, all you had to say was your name. Like, my name is John Burks, and that reveals the topic of what you'll be talking about. You also want to establish credibility, and you can establish credibility two ways. You can establish credibility with an external source or personal reference. So you may have personal experience, maybe going to a certain place. Maybe you've been to Hawaii and you're giving us an informative speech about Hawaii. So you would just tell your audience, in my experience of going to Hawaii, I had a wonderful time. That establishes a little bit of credibility. Also, using external sources is a great way of establishing credibility. For example, you could say, in an article in Time magazine, they once stated, blah, blah, and then where that was found. The last thing you do in your introduction, which will always be the last thing, is you close with your central idea, which is kind of like your first transition, which transitions from the introduction into the body of the speech. Now, the central idea in the speech world is equivalent to the thesis statement in the English comp world. So you've probably done this before. You've had comp 1 and comp 2. So the idea is that you have this one sentence that, as it says on the PowerPoint, it encapsulates the major ideas in the speech. So just like your thesis statement, the central idea is one sentence that lets the audience know these are the major things that I'll be covering in this speech. So again, an introduction has four parts. An attention getter, number one, and always number one. It reveals the topic at some point in the introduction, establish credibility, and then the last thing that it does, it will preview the speech or state the central idea. Now, the conclusion only has three parts. The number one thing in the conclusion is that it signals the end. And now it signals the end by letting people know that you're going to say some simple phrases, or also can be referred to as signpost, as using like in conclusion, or in summary, or in closing. Those are probably three of the more popular ones and the easiest ones to use. I personally think for beginning public speakers, it's good to use in conclusion. Now, you would use this in more of an academic type speech, or maybe even in like a public address to maybe a city council, or maybe even in business. But of course, you would never use like in conclusion if you were giving a eulogy. You kind of have to figure out when's a good time to, or what's a good way to kind of close different speeches. So this doesn't work for all of them, but it works for 99% of them. The next thing you do is you rephrase your central idea. By rephrasing your central idea, you use it in the past tense. Obviously, these are things that you've already discussed. Therefore, you would say, in my speech today, I have discussed, and then recap those major points in one sentence. And after that, that leads to the third thing, which is the easiest thing, which is the closing statement. Now, the best closing statement may be something like, thank you, or thank you for your time. And then a slight pause, 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. Of course, you say that into your head. And then you just exit stage left or stage right, whatever they tell you. Now, one of the things, though, I want to make sure that I get this point across is that we do not close, a closing statement is not, we don't say the end. We don't say that's all I got. I don't have anything else to say. Those are not good closing statements. That basically just tells your audience that, hey, I'm done with you. You don't mean enough to me to kind of keep going. So by saying things like thank you or thank you for your time or something, are there any questions? That's something that can simply close off the speech and be very helpful. Okay, so remember, a conclusion has three parts. It signals the end by stating in conclusion, it rephrases the central idea, and then also it ends with a good closing statement like thank you. Remember this for conclusions. Conclusions should never incorporate new material in them. Don't introduce new material in the conclusion. That should have been done in the body of the speech. If you have something you want to add, you kind of have to wait till the next speech to be able to incorporate that. Unless maybe someone says something like ask you a question, then you can bring that up. But for the most part, a conclusion is more of encapsulates the speech and what you've discussed and lets the audience know that the speech is over. Now, some different methods that we can use in both the introduction and the conclusion are right here. Things like quotes, questions, short stories or extended stories, also referred to as narratives, stating the importance of something, and then also startling the audience. Now, quotes, for example. You can open with a quote, and you can also close with a quote. I had a student one time that did a really cool speech on Edgar Allan Poe, and she opened with a quote from Edgar Allan Poe, and she actually closed with a quote from Edgar Allan Poe. And it was really cool because it really bookended the entire speech, and it made it just phenomenal. Also, questions. Questions are great. They're a great way to start your speech, and they're a great way to end your speech as well. There's two types of questions that we kind of really have. We have a response-driven question. So you may ask your audience, hey, by a show of hands, how many people eat at McDonald's? Ooh, I do. And then, actually, I don't really like to eat at McDonald's. Well, sometimes I do. It just depends. So the idea is that you've asked your audience to respond, and hopefully they will respond. Some of them won't, but hopefully they will. Then there's also the rhetorical question. And a rhetorical question wants the audience to answer in their head. So you may ask a question, have you ever been pulled over by a police officer? Right there, that question did not ask by a show of hands who's been pulled over by a police officer. It just asks the audience to kind of think about that question and answer it in their head. Now, sometimes some people will respond, and hopefully they kind of understand that it's a rhetorical question. But again, a rhetorical question does not require a response. It requires, really you're asking your audience to just answer in their head. Then we have short and extended narratives. Now, that's a short story or an extended story. Now, we're going to actually cover the extended story in the personal narrative, which you'll see a video about that pretty soon. So the short narrative is in one main point. Maybe it starts off the speech, and then it doesn't address it again. An extended narrative kind of really addresses it throughout the entire speech. Maybe the whole thing is the extended narrative. So you kind of have to use that method, and a lot of people do that. I've seen that before, and it's very effective if done correctly. Stating the importance. Now, you may state the importance in the introduction or in the conclusion. Let's say you're telling people to vote. You may tell them in the beginning how important it is for them to go and vote, and at the end, you may want to stress again why it's so important that they go out today and get registered to vote so they can vote in maybe an upcoming election. Now, the last thing is startling the audience, and this is the thing that kind of gets a lot of people, and a lot of people see this, and I think they misinterpret this last thing. By startling the audience, it does not give you a license to gross us out. It doesn't give you an opportunity to put really nasty pictures into a PowerPoint and go, oh, my teacher said I could startle the audience. No, that's not the case. And I think the best way to startle your audience, obviously, is with words. That's a great way to get them to kind of start thinking, because they may not look up from what they're doing to see your PowerPoint, but if you get their attention with words, then that'll do it. Now, one of the popular ones that I've heard before, I've never used, but I've heard before, is college professors when they walk into a class and they tell the students on the first day, they go, look to your left and look to your right. By the end of the semester, one of these students will not be here because this class is so hard it's impossible. Now, of course, this class is not. All you do is pay attention, do your work, and everything should be okay. Submit a few speeches, easy peasy. But the idea is that if it's a great way to start your audience, it's a way to get their attention. Now, so these are just a few ways that methods that you can use in introductions and conclusions. Remember, these are very important items. You've got to have 4 parts in that introduction. I'm going to look for that. You've got to have those 3 parts in the conclusions, and I'm going to look for that. And the more you practice these, you'll find that they will just become second nature, and you'll know that those components fit in there. If you have any questions, please let me know. You can always email me on Canvas, and I'll be happy to respond as fast as I possibly can. You guys have a great day, and I will talk to you soon.